There's an assumption most people make the moment they look at a car. It's symmetrical. Design one half, flip it, mirror it across, done. And honestly, that doesn't sound unreasonable. Humans are symmetrical. Most living things are symmetrical. And cars do tend towards symmetry for very practical reasons: weight distribution, aerodynamics, and above all, manufacturing efficiency. But look a little closer, and that picture starts to crack. The fuel door sits on one side. The tow hook cover doesn't have to line up with anything in particular. The wipers sweep in their own asymmetric arc, and the mirrors, as similar as they look from a distance, aren't always perfect reflections of each other. These details are small enough that the eye just glosses over them, and that's exactly the point. Cars aren't perfectly symmetrical. They just create a convincing enough illusion of symmetry that we never think to question it. So what happens when designers stop pretending? And why would anyone deliberately turn that asymmetry into something people actually remember? The clearest example isn't in the overall shape of the car. It's somewhere most drivers never think to look: the tail lights. In Europe, regulations require every car to have at least one reverse light and at least one rear fog light. Two different functions, two different colors, white and red. And if a manufacturer wants to keep costs down, fitting exactly one of each is perfectly legal. The result is a car with a white reversing light on one side and a red fog light on the other. Two of each isn't required, just one of each, and that's enough to pass. Someone standing behind that car won't notice anything strange because the overall taillight cluster, the body shape, and the rear layout are still designed to read as balanced. The brain fills in the rest automatically. That's how the illusion of symmetry actually works in practice, not by making everything identical, but by making the differences small enough that nobody bothers to look twice. And once you start seeing cars that way, these asymmetric details start showing up everywhere. They're not rare. We've just never been in the habit of noticing them. There's a fairly clear line between asymmetry that gets hidden and asymmetry that gets designed in on purpose. The first kind exists because of regulations, cost savings, or the fact that nobody's really paying attention. The second kind is different. In those cases, the imbalance shows up in the most fundamental parts of the car itself: the doors, the air intakes, the engineering underneath, or the layout at the rear. And the reasoning behind each case is completely different. Some cars are asymmetric because it makes them more practical, easier for passengers to get in and out. Some are asymmetric because of cost-cutting, a halfway solution dressed up as a feature. Some are asymmetric because of performance and aerodynamics, where each side of the car has a completely different job to do. And some are asymmetric simply because the designer wanted it that way, no further explanation required. When people think about cars with asymmetric doors, the Hyundai Veloster is usually the first name that comes up. One door on the driver's side, two on the passenger's side. Strange looking, but it makes a certain kind of sense. What most people don't realize is that the Veloster wasn't the first car to do this, and the real story behind that layout is a lot more interesting than anything Hyundai ever put together. Go back to 1999. Saturn, the brand General Motors, built from the ground up with the slogan "a different kind of car company," decided to actually live up to that promise. They introduced the Saturn SC Coupe with a 3-door setup, one door on the passenger side and 2 doors on the driver's side, with the third being a small suicide door tucked just behind the driver's door. Saturn called it the RAD door, short for rear accessible door, and claimed it as the world's first 3-door coupe. The goal was simple: make it easier for rear passengers to get in and out of a body style that had always been notoriously difficult to access. Here's where the story gets genuinely good. The idea didn't come from a market research team. It didn't come from an engineering meeting in Detroit. It came from a Saturn dealer named Stuart Lasser out of New Jersey, who noticed that his son Hal kept complaining about how miserable it was to climb into the back seat of a two-door coupe. Engineers at Saturn ran with it, moved fast, and the three-door coupes were sitting in dealerships by November 1998. The extra door added only about 50 pounds to the car, despite requiring significant structural reinforcement. And Hal, the kid who inadvertently changed the way American coupes were designed, probably never saw a dime from any of it. The idea of asymmetric doors had actually surfaced earlier in Japan. Around 1989, Mitsubishi introduced a variant of their Minica K car called the Minica Lettuce, a small hatchback designed to make it easier to load groceries and children. The concept was convincing enough that other Japanese manufacturers took notice, and Honda later applied a similar door layout to the SMX. That same year, Ford entered the conversation in their own way. At the time, Ford was seen as being behind the curve because nearly every competitor already offered a five-door version of their subcompact lineup, while the Fiesta still didn't. To generate some attention when they finally joined the trend, Ford revealed the Fiesta Urba concept, a car where one side carried a sporty, aggressive look, while the other leaned into practicality. The Fiesta Urba never went into production, though, serving only as a preview of the next-generation Fiesta. Peugeot came close to something similar with the 309 brake, a station wagon pitched to them by an outside coach builder that looked completely production-ready, but was ultimately turned down without any official explanation. Long before any of those names, AMC had already done something similar back in 1975 that almost nobody talks about. The AMC Pacer had a passenger door that was a full 4 inches longer than the driver's door, and that wasn't a manufacturing mistake. It was a deliberate design decision from the start, intended to make it easier for rear passengers to exit the car when parked at the curb. A car that looked like a rolling fishbowl, and hidden inside that strange exterior was a surprisingly thoughtful piece of design, thinking that almost no one recognized at the time. Before 1996, most American minivans had exactly one sliding door, and it was on the passenger side. The driver's side was just a large, flat panel with nothing on it. That setup kept production costs down and added structural rigidity to the body, and it was sold to buyers as a practical choice since passengers, especially children, would be stepping out onto the safer curbside anyway. That logic held up well enough on paper, and technically, it wasn't wrong. It just meant that most American minivans of that era were fundamentally asymmetric vehicles, and nobody was calling them that. Chrysler was the company that changed everything. They introduced the minivan to the American market in 1984 with the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager, and by the time the third generation arrived in 1996, they did something no one else in the segment had dared to do. Add a sliding door on the driver's side. It was a minivan first, optional at launch, but quickly standardized. Chrysler had surveyed existing owners beforehand and found that 85% of them would pay an extra $300 for that feature, and with a number like that in hand, they knew exactly what they were doing. Ford wasn't so fortunate. The Ford Windstar launched in 1995, more than a year ahead of the Chrysler redesign, and at the time, that seemed like a significant advantage. But when Chrysler dropped the driver-side sliding door on the 1996 Dodge Caravan, Ford got caught completely flat-footed. That head start evaporated almost overnight. Ford's response was what automotive journalists later called, fairly bluntly, half-assed engineering. Rather than redesigning the body structure to accommodate a proper sliding door on the driver's side, Ford just made the driver's door longer. That was it. They gave it the official name Family Entry System, paired it with a forward-tilting driver's seat that theoretically improved access to the rear, and called it a solution. At its core, it was just a longer door, no sliding mechanism, no meaningful structural redesign, just longer. The Family Entry System appeared in early 1997 as a 1998 model year update and survived until Ford finally launched a proper dual sliding door Windstar for 1999. This is a completely different kind of asymmetry from the Saturn SC or the AMC Pacer. Nobody at Ford sat down and came up with something clever. They stretched a door, gave it a name that sounded official, and hoped people wouldn't ask too many questions. And frankly, the people buying those vans deserved better than that. At this point, the asymmetry starts having clearer technical justification, not because passengers need an easier way in, and not because an automaker needed to react to a competitor. In this group, each side of the car has a completely different job, and the exterior just reflects that honestly. The Lamborghini Murcielago LP640 is the hardest example to ignore. When the LP640 debuted at the Geneva Motor Show in 2006, one of the first things people noticed was that the two sides of the car didn't look the same. The left side had a large opening channeling air directly to the oil cooler, while the right side had a much smaller opening nearly closed off, feeding the water radiator. The upgraded 6.5-liter V12, pushing 631 horsepower, needed a significantly larger oil cooler than the previous generation, and Lamborghini didn't try to hide it. They left the asymmetry right there on the body as a kind of technical statement. The Alfa Romeo 4C tells a similar story, where different cooling demands on each side of the car produced an intake layout that doesn't match up left to right. But this kind of asymmetry doesn't only show up on exotic cars. The Ford Escort GT is actually a more interesting example, precisely because nobody expects to find it there. The standard Ford Escort was a small, inoffensive little runabout with nothing particularly remarkable about it. But when it was upgraded to GT spec with a Mazda 1.8-liter engine, the front end had to change to handle the increased cooling demands. The Ford badge ended up sitting off-center, and angled strips were cut into the front fascia to open up a larger intake. Stand in front of an Escort GT, and the two sides of that grille are clearly not the same, and the reason is entirely underneath the hood. The Fiat Ritmo tried a similar idea, but handled it differently. Rather than shifting the badge off to one side, the way the Escort GT did, the Ritmo kept the badge at center, while the surrounding details failed to balance out around it. The result is a subtler kind of visual asymmetry, just enough that someone looking closely will feel like something is slightly off without being able to say exactly what. Every case discussed so far has had one thing in common. You can actually see the asymmetry with your own eyes, whether it's a longer door, a larger intake, or a badge sitting in the wrong place. With Renault, the story is completely different. These cars look perfectly normal from the outside, and you'd have to get underneath them to start understanding what's actually going on. The Renault 4, introduced in 1961, is where it all started. When designing this car, Renault wanted to maximize interior space and create a flat, wide cargo area that didn't get eaten up by wheel arches. Their solution was to use trailing arms and transverse torsion bars at the rear suspension. To keep the two torsion bars from overlapping each other, engineers staggered them longitudinally, one bar positioned ahead of the other. That arrangement allowed both bars to be identical in size and stiffness, which kept production costs down. But the direct consequence was that the wheelbase on each side of the car ended up at different lengths, with the right side coming in about 1.9 inches longer than the left. Nobody could see it from outside the car. Nobody felt it while driving. But it was there in every single Renault 4 ever built. That same setup carried over to the Renault 5, 6, 7, and 16, becoming enough of a recurring engineering characteristic that people in the industry started calling it simply a Renault thing. And if a joke about Renault reliability is forming in your head right now, honestly, you're not alone. This is the strangest kind of asymmetry in this entire story because it doesn't serve the car's image, it doesn't create any feature the driver can actually feel, and it's completely invisible to anyone who doesn't know where to look. At this point, there are no more technical reasons to fall back on. No oil cooler that needs feeding. No passenger struggling to climb in. No torsion bars that need staggering. This is the group where designers simply decided to break the mold because they wanted to. The Land Rover Discovery is the easiest example to spot. For decades, the Discovery carried an offset license plate at the rear, sitting clearly to one side, rather than centered the way almost every other car positions it. The original reason was completely practical. The first-generation Discovery mounted a full-size spare tire on the tailgate, and the license plate had to move out of the way to make room. But when that spare tire stopped being mounted there, the offset plate stayed as a tribute to the original design. Almost nobody liked this decision. Conversion kits that move the plate back to a centered position have been available online for years, and the market for them has never exactly been small. The Nissan Cube went considerably further. That car was almost completely consumed by its own asymmetry. The rear window wrapped around one side of the tailgate but not the other, and the public reaction was strong enough that almost nobody remembered the car offered an optional carpeted dashboard. The Nissan Cube became the poster child for a car that people rejected almost immediately just because it looked different. And that's probably the saddest ending any asymmetric car has ever had. Cars look symmetrical because symmetry is visually comfortable. But behind that exterior, there are countless asymmetric details that the eye simply chooses to overlook, from European taillights to the wheelbase of classic Renaults. And when a car stops pretending to be symmetrical, it can become smarter like the Saturn SC, more useful like the 1996 Chrysler minivan, or instantly disliked like the Nissan Cube. Next time you're sitting behind a car at a red light, take a closer look at the tail lights, the license plate position, the fuel door, and the air intakes. There's a decent chance the car in front of you isn't as symmetrical as you always assumed.